Hello, I'm Paul J. Leslie. I am going to be presenting a little bit of information to you that I've entitled Unlimited Resources. This is simple ways to access, find, and utilize client strengths for hypnotic change. I was going to do a PowerPoint and have a whole bunch of diagrams and figures, but since this is a conference, an online conference about hypnosis, I thought it might just be easy for us to have a conversation. I wanted to talk a little bit about how I view doing therapy and how that goes over into hypnotherapy, and specifically working with people who unfortunately have been through trauma. Now, trauma is such a buzzword these days in most interventions of a psychotherapeutic nature. And unfortunately, we see a bulk of that, those of us who are working in the field of hypnotherapy. Just a real quick kind of background. I'm a licensed professional counselor. I have a doctorate in counseling psychology. My influences are predominantly people who came out of the social constructionistic view of psychotherapy. My biggest influence was Milton Erickson. And if you've known or read anything about hypnotherapy, you know Dr. Erickson's ideas and I guess ways of working were so far advanced that we're still just trying to figure out specifically what he was doing. I've also equally been inspired by people like Gregory Bateson, Mental Research Institute, other people, Bradford Keeney, Wendell Ray, Paul Waslewick, a lot of people who way back when had some fascinating ideas that I think unfortunately have either been overlooked or forgotten by many therapists working today. And I'll explain more of that as we go along. So I've been working for many years with people who've been through trauma, and I found some things that work for me, and I found a couple of things that work not just in trauma but psychotherapy in general. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out by talking to you about specifically how I work when it comes to context and how we can utilize this idea about context into our hypnotic work. Our goal for any psychotherapeutic exchange, from my perspective, is to give clients an experience, and hopefully a profound and a pleasant experience. Unfortunately, what we have seen a lot lately is there has been more of a focus on what I call left brain therapy. And that's where we're trying to use linear, almost mechanical views of how the brain works to try to get people to think more rationally, do more actions that empower their lives. And sometimes this can be very effective. However, in case you haven't noticed, humans a lot of times are just very nonlinear creatures. And I think we're far too complex to just have a simple A causes B way of looking at working. So somebody comes in for trauma and the traumatic event, causes B, the traumatic symptoms. I mean, a lot of times that can be true. However, we're also forgetting the important place that context takes in our therapeutic interaction. Now, by context, I mean a frame of reference in which clients carry with them, not just in trauma, but really in most any situation, any problem that they bring to you for psychotherapy. Oftentimes I find that therapists are spending way too much time focusing on a specific theory or a specific technique and forgetting about the frame of a problem that the client has brought in. And unfortunately, the therapist ends up getting stuck inside that context, inside that frame. And so any of the maneuvers he or she attempts ends up getting them stuck within that frame. So a lot of times what will happen is that the client will come in with a certain situation that they need help with, And the therapist will do their best to help, but they almost forget that by stepping into the same frame of reference and context that the client has brought, they are actually not only having more difficulty helping the client change, but they actually become part of this dynamic interaction that is stuck in the frame. Let me try to make this a little more clear. An event happens, and then we draw a distinction about the event, whether it was good, whether it was bad, what it means, and then we construct a frame of reference in which all our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors refer back to. As long as we stay inside this frame, nothing that we do is going to be as effective as if we are outside the frame. Now, what I mean by being inside the frame is this. Picture a frame and the word problem inside the frame. Now, what does a problem have to have? A solution. What does a solution have to have? A problem. So these two are, going back and forth within this frame. Really, to help our clients, the worst thing I think we can do is get stuck in that frame, because we'll be trying to find a solution for them. But by the very act of buying into that frame, buying into that distinction of that event, we're actually not only solidifying it, but we may even be creating a bigger monster. Maybe you've had this experience before. You have a client, and he or she's a good client. They're here to work, they're here to help, and you're doing everything you can to assist them, but nothing seems to be working. I find that 8 out of 10 times, maybe 9 out of 10 times, it's because we're trying really hard to do a certain technique, a certain theory, a certain way of working, but we're locked in that same problem frame that the client has brought with him or her. And as a result of that, anything we do will have minimal effectiveness, because it'll always be tied directly to the problem. So any solution that we try to come up with will be tied to the problem. Any explanation for the problem will be tied in to the problem. Any maneuver to adjust what's going on with the problem will be tied to the problem. So how does one work? Well, for me, what I found effective, and I was very inspired by the work of Gregory Bateson and Bradford Keeney, who talked a lot about context. Some excellent books on this would be anything Bateson wrote, and this book called Aesthetics of Change that Keeney wrote back, I think, 1983. It still holds up, I think. But it all comes down to who is defining this frame. It's the observer, the person who it's either happening to or is a part of this. Well, as we are therapists, the second someone brings their frame in, we become a part of that. We're all tied in this interaction. Until we have this frame, until we get outside the frame, get the client outside the frame, it's going to be harder to get them to change. So let me give you an example. Had a lady I worked with a good while back who had gone through some trauma, and it had really affected her so much that she had to take time off work. She had moved back in with her parents, who were very helpful and trying to help her get back on her feet. But she kept going on and on about she felt like she was a bum. And, she was, my parents are having to help support me, and I have a little bit of savings, but it's rapidly going, and this thing's happened to me, and I feel like I'm a bum, and I can't get motivated to do anything. And that term bum kept coming up over and over. So if we envision that as if it's in a frame, if I try to do things like challenge her thinking about being a bum, or, if I say, now, what evidence do you have that you're a bum, and all of that, that can be helpful. I'm not disputing that. However, what we're trying to do is set up this battle, if you will, between her thoughts of being a bum, and what we're trying to do is get her to not think of herself as a bum. And so we get into this struggle because a part of her mind really truly thinks she's a bum. The other part maybe not so much. So we're trying to appeal to that part to say you're not a bum, and let me challenge your thinking, and get you in activities, anything we can do to dispute all of this that you're a bum. Now that's staying within that frame of the problem. For me, what I decided to do was, if she keeps bringing up bum, what are some good things about being a bum? Well, I asked her, I said, well, what kind of bum are you? And of course, she didn't know what I was talking about. She said, what do you mean? I said, well, you could be a beach bum. I mean, if you're going to be a bum, why couldn't you be a beach bum? Ever thought about being a beach bum? And for those of you who are outside the United States, in case you're not familiar with the term beach bum, it's just somebody who has little to no job and just spends their time laying on the beach enjoying the good life. So we started talking about being a beach bum, because if she's going to be a bum, you might as well do it at the beach, or enjoy being a bum. And then we started talking about having a beach bum life. What's it like to be a beach bum? What's it like to have a beach bum life? How could we bring more of that beach bum lifestyle into her present life? So we did things like, maybe she needed to start painting her room different colors, because her parents wanted her to feel at home, so maybe she could paint her room to reflect the beach. So she could paint the walls a nice watercolor, and then maybe another wall a color of sand, and have pictures of the beach, or even have a little potted plant with like a little palm trees and those kind of things. And what we ended up doing by this line of discussion is we moved her out of this frame we had of I'm a bum and all these terrible things that have happened to me, and we moved her out into a different perspective of how is that a resource. Because to me, lying on the beach enjoying yourself sounds pretty good. We also got her doing something different. You see, that's a big thing. We've got to get people doing something different. And when we're trying to get them to do something different all in that same frame, it becomes kind of difficult. But if it's something radically outside the frame, something that kind of tickles their imagination, or just something so unique that they never thought of, they generally are more open to doing it. So I got her painting her room. What has that done? Well, number one, it's given her a sense of accomplishment. She's done something, whereas before she was just sitting, feeling unfortunately miserable about all these terrible things that have happened to her. Also got her, let's make a trip to the beach. Where I live, it's about 2.5 to 3 hours away. That's okay for a day trip in the car. So we made sure that, every other week she went and spent the day at the beach. It's getting her out of her same kind of surroundings. We started talking about how she could wear her bum life, her beach bum life, as a badge of honor. So maybe even getting a T-shirt that said "beach bum," and how do you live like that? Actually sound quite delightful for those of us who have to punch the clock, on our work life. So moving her out of that gave her access to more resources. Another quick story, just to illustrate the point, is I had a young boy I saw one time who unfortunately had been taken away from his mother due to her mother's excessive drug use. She had unfortunately become a methamphetamine addict, and there was a lot of boyfriends coming in and out of the house, some who were violent, and it was just a real mess. And this boy was taken away from his mother and given custody by his grandparents. Well, he had never really spent much time with his grandparents, who lived all the way on a different part of the state. He was about 8 years old, if I remember correctly. So not only was he being taken away from his mother, who with all her dysfunction, she's still his mother, he's going to see grandparents who he doesn't know that well in a place he's rarely ever been, changing schools. So there's a lot of trials and tribulations going on. So when I started talking to him, I really didn't spend much time getting into the nitty-gritty about how he was feeling about mom, or all these kind of really problem-oriented discourse. What I did is just started asking him about his life and what he enjoyed doing. In that talking, for some reason, we were joking back and forth, and I did some little voice, like an accent, and he thought it was the funniest thing he'd ever heard. And I said, do you do accents? And he tried to do an accent. Wasn't really that good, but I played it up like it was. And I said, you know what, that would be a better accent if we worked on it. So what we started doing is we started working on how he could do an accent. He wanted to do a couple of different nationalities. He wanted to do a Scottish accent. He wanted to do an Indian accent, like in India, and a Russian accent. I don't know why he had this perspective of nationality he wanted to do the accent. So we do things, in our discussion, like how can you, if you were a Russian accent, how would you answer in English when your teacher calls on you? I am here. Bobby is here in sitting in seat, whole body available to learn. And by the way, if you're in Russia, please don't judge me on this accent, okay? So Bobby, as I'll call him, just went on and really perfected his accent. Now, why am I telling you this story? It's because he used that as a way not only to distract himself from his problem, but he used it as a way to make friends, which he was having trouble doing. He started entertaining his class. He started entertaining his classmates. The resource that he got was competency. You see, he needed to feel like he could do something. And here he is in this strange place with his strange grandparents that were fairly new to him. None of the school kids did he know, and they know everybody. They don't know him. And here he's an outsider. He needed something to contribute. So we really worked on those accents, and he started doing the accents. The kids loved it. They were, coming up to him at the on recess when they're outside. Bobby, do the Scottish accent or do the whatever accent. And the teacher eventually felt a little bad about this. Sent a note home to his grandmother saying, "Please ask Bobby to stop doing accents so much. It's disrupting the class." But at the same time, the kids were loving it. They started calling him. He started getting friends due to his being kind of playful and jester with the accents, and he started feeling more at home. So before we spend all our time in this problem of must be terrible to be abandoned by your mother and all of that, we went over and got outside. What are you good at? You're good at accents. Accents are wonderful. You can be anybody with an accent. Maybe that would give him some competence, which it did. It also gave him some really good ability to connect with other people. Now, and that's all cool for regular therapy, but how do we do this specifically with hypnosis? Well, it comes down really very simply. Anytime I'm working with someone who has been through trauma, and to be honest, anytime I'm working with anyone, period, my focus is not on the problem. I've seen far too many well-meaning hypnotists and hypnotherapists who spend a lot of time going back through the trauma and all of that, and it ends up getting the person either stuck in it or it's traumatic again. But what people need is a certain experience, a certain emotional state. That emotional state, called resilience, is made up of things in which people find outside the problem frame. So how do we find client strengths? How do we find client resources to use in our hypnotic interventions? I'm giving you something, 5 things. It's real easy to remember. If you think of the word vibes, V-I-B-E-S, vibes. What that stands for are a person's values, a person's identity, a person's behaviors, a certain environment, spirituality. Now those 5 things, those 5 vibes are there for when we're talking to people to ask them about things that inspire them or motivate them or give them a certain emotional state that will give them that resource, not to spend time going through the whole trauma again. So I'll give you an example. I had a man who'd come to see me for a good while. He'd been through some traumatic things, and he'd been diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder. I personally think it was post-traumatic stress, but had been diagnosed with the generalized anxiety. Not once during the several months of treatment did I ever talk about the problem. All I did was figure out what gave him comfort, what gave him the ability to become comfortable, to become resourceful, to become resilient. And it's in those vibes. So his top value was learning. He really loved to learn all kinds of different things. Well, when I hear that as a hypnotherapist, it's a dream, because I'm like, you want to learn. Isn't it wonderful how much we can learn about ourselves? And asking them before you even do your hypnotic inductions, what do you like about learning? And what the person liked about learning, this gentleman liked about learning, was the fact that he could discover new things. Well, isn't it interesting? Well, that sounds like a perfect hypnotic suggestion, doesn't it? Think about values. The V in our vibes is that a person's values dictates their life. His highest value is learning. No matter what, that's what he's going to be spending his time focused on. Unfortunately, due to trauma, the anxiety, whatever, he felt a little disconnected from his value. So the more we could talk about, as he became comfortable, about learning about yourself, discovering new things, realizing that that person that you are has so many layers, so many new discoveries. And as we learn to relax in new ways, in new processes, we can effectively discover a new you that was always there, but may seem new. This is the kind of the banter that we would do. The I of the vibe stands for identity. How do they see themselves? We all have an identity, a mask we wear that's important to us. A lot of times we get, disconnected from the mask due to trauma. So for example, I worked with a lady that her highest value was being a mother. Well, what do mothers do? They nurture, at least good ones do. So wouldn't it be a wonderful thing that as she recalls the wonderful times when she was nurturing those children, and that she could also nurture herself in that same way, and that she could be there for her children, but also to be there for herself and to take care of herself, to guide herself like a mother would guide a child. So they're giving you all these kind of things that are important to them, that can be used to move them outside the problem frame into a resource frame. So we have values, identity. B is for behaviors. We all do certain things that give us a good feeling, that give us a sense of proficiency, or like Bobby, competency with the voices. So if there's some behavior they like to do, well, while they're relaxing in a hypnotic state, just talking about that behavior has so many resources to activate. Because when we have them in their mind activate those resources, they cannot help but move out of away from the trauma, the problem, and into the resource state. We can't get rid of the event. But if we can get them balanced out with, you have this horrible event, but also you have this incredible other ability, this behavior, you can get some kind of balance, and that will lead to hopefully some positive outcome. So if somebody says, I really liked biking, what do you like about biking? Oh, the freedom of being on the road. Well, right there you have a resource, because aren't most of us seeking freedom? If you've ever been traumatized, you're seeking freedom from the trauma, freedom from the anxiety, freedom from all the other negative symptoms. So talking about being on the bike and where you can just let go and enjoy the moment and feeling free to experience new things as you ride by effortlessly. Okay, just by doing that, we're moving their brain out of the problem toward a resource. Don't you think freedom and letting go will probably do this person a lot of good when they're not in a hypnotic state? Because if we're activating it or reactivating it, it can start focusing their attention in different ways where, like I said, hopefully we can bring a little balance to their life. So we have values, we have identity, we have behaviors, and E is for environment. And a lot of times this is just certain places. I've talked to people and certain things and places they do in certain locales brings them a tremendous sense of comfort or peace or creativity. I remember a lady who she was an artist. She loved to paint. And sometimes even when she wasn't painting, she would just go and sit in her studio, her art studio. So when she was in hypnosis, just talking about what it's like to be sitting in the art studio, surrounded by many things, which you can be very proud of. Things that can be used in multiple new ways. Ways you can unleash your creativity, can create new outcomes in this studio. So again, that environment, we can use that as a resource. Sitting in one's garden. I remember talking with a guy who loved to sit in his garden. What do you like sitting in the garden? Watching the leaves kind of rustle in the wind. So that imagery alone is enough to kind of calm him down. So use that. All right. If they've been to another country and that time I was in Slovakia was just amazing. The people are amazing. It's wonderful. What a great thing when you remember walking the streets while you're on that trip in Slovakia and how curious you were when you were walking those streets because you didn't really know what you'd see next, what exciting new adventure you could go on now. So we have values, identity, behaviors, environment, and the last is S, is spirituality. And this can be used for people who are religious, people who are not religious. I've actually used it even people who are atheist. So they see the world as not having any kind of supernatural element. So they have a spirituality that's kind of rooted in the natural flow of life. So why not talk about nature? I use nature an awful lot in general because we're all a part of nature. So talking about nature. If someone is a Christian and you talk to them a little bit about how that brings them comfort, you utilize that. You take those resources and you put them in that nice, comfortable state where they can be surrounded by Jesus' love. Or you could slow your breathing down the way the Buddha would when he'd be in his deepest meditations. Or feeling one connected with the angels. Whatever it is. We don't, hopefully you don't, judge what people's beliefs are. We utilize them to have a successful outcome. So where we see a decrease of the trauma and an increase of more comfort, more resiliency. So real quickly again, the whole focus is before we do anything, we need to find a way to move people outside of a frame of reference that is traumatic. The trauma's there. I know we've got to talk about it and people have to tell their story. But excessive time spent within that frame after the story is told solidifies it. And it's harder to get out of it. So maybe finding a way to using the vibes, values, identity, behaviors, environment, spirituality in the hypnotic inductions is a wonderful way to start moving their brain toward a different outcome. When we focus on a different outcome, a different situation, a different emotional state, we, much like the guy I worked with who had general anxiety, we will not even have to talk sometimes about the trauma. Because if you're providing them with those tools, you will find that if and when you do talk about the trauma, they'll be in a much better place because you will have given them this sense of peace, resiliency, and one emotion I love is curiosity. And curiosity comes from you as you investigate what these vibes, everybody's got different vibes. So start talking to your clients in a way that moves them out of this kind of impoverished way of being in the world into a frame of reference that's totally different. I hope this was helpful. I know this wasn't a strict technique kind of what you need to say or what you need to do, but to me, if you can find a way to consistently change the context of what this person's experiencing to give them more options, then I think we're in a much better state to do all the hypnotic techniques and the therapy techniques that have shown that they work. I think you'll find that they may even work more effectively. Again, my name is Paul J. Leslie. I'm a psychotherapist, author, educator, and right now I'm residing in South Carolina in the United States. If you'd like more information about my work, my books, my trainings, if you'll go to www.drpaulleslie.com, drpaulleslie.com. Hopefully we can connect. Please, come speak to me if we ever run into each other at a conference. I hope this was helpful. I wish you the best and good luck. And I'll see you when I see you, when you're really relaxed and really peaceful and really in a good place to take in all this information down at the unconscious level.